Many train collisions are preventable by simply calling the railroad company. North Carolina has rail service in 86 counties with 30 private railroad companies. They operate 5,000 miles of track, along which 5 million people live in 300 communities. Unlike highways, which are public property, railroad tracks are private property. A multi-ton train traveling at 55 miles per hour cannot swerve and takes over a mile to stop. What could possibly go wrong? If you need to stop a train, which of the 30 railroads do you call? There is no universal 911. Each railroad company has their own emergency number. People trespass on railroad tracks for shortcuts, to play, or take pictures. The law requires a person to have permission from the railroad to be on the tracks. Someone on the tracks without permission is trespassing. Get them off the tracks. Officers may be near railroad tracks for investigations, canine searches, pursuits, or to stop a train for an emergency. You need to call the correct railroad company. To prevent tragedies, you must stop the train. Today you will learn how to stop a train. To stop a train, look for the blue sign.
Hey, I'm Roger Smock with NCDOT BeRailSafe. Take a look at the safety equipment of this crossing. We have lights and bells that ring for the approach of the train, crossing gates, and crossbucks, and also the emergency notification sign, also known as the blue sign. Remember, every 3 hours, something like this occurs.
I was coming around the curve at Morrisville. It was an 18-wheeler. When I saw that he wasn't gonna move, then it's like an overwhelming feeling came on my body because I said, well, it's gonna be an impact. We collided going about 72, 73 miles per hour. The heart starts racing. I mean, your adrenaline goes up, and you have to just tell yourself, you can't panic because you don't want to do anything critical. Yeah, it wasn't a good day.
Many crashes like this can be prevented if you stop the train traffic. So how do you stop a train? Use the blue sign, not your blue light.
Never park your patrol vehicle on train tracks with the blue light activated to stop a train. It doesn't work.
So why not call 911 or your department's dispatch? Calling 911 is an option, but it's not the best option to stop the train traffic. In North Carolina, the train tracks are controlled by 30 independent railroad companies, and each has their own emergency number to stop the train traffic. So how do you know which railroad company to call? You look at the blue sign.
There's not a single emergency number or 911 system for all the railroads. The blue sign is the 911 system for the railroads. To prevent a crash, the quickest way to stop a train is to locate the blue sign and call the emergency number. This connects you directly to a railroad dispatcher who can stop train traffic on the rails you're calling from. In your community, you may see CSX, Norfolk Southern, Amtrak, BNSF, or the Piedmont trains all traveling on the same tracks. So which company are you supposed to call?
You guessed it. Find the blue sign. The blue sign lists the railroad company that owns and controls the tracks. They know what trains are on their tracks, where they're going, where they are, and how to stop those trains.
The blue sign located at the crossing contains 3 very important pieces of information: the railroad's emergency telephone number, the USDOT crossing identification number, and the railroad company controlling the tracks. The name of the railroad controlling the tracks, as already mentioned, The emergency number that connects you to the dispatcher and the crossing ID is the complete address for your location on the railroad. The crossing ID is always a 6-digit number followed by a letter that identifies each railroad crossing in the United States.
Officers routinely give their location by address, cross streets, mile markers, or routes. But these references will not allow a railroad dispatcher to know where you're located on their tracks.
After all, some railroad dispatchers are located hundreds of miles away, controlling thousands of miles of track and tens of thousands of crossings in numerous states.
Providing the railroad dispatcher the closest crossing identification number is the most effective way to communicate your location on the railroad tracks. Remember, there are 30 railroad companies in North Carolina. Do not assume that all the tracks in your area are controlled by the same railroad company. If there are more than one set of tracks or crossings in your community, look in the immediate area for additional blue signs to determine if other railroad companies need to be notified.
Even after the railroad dispatcher has been notified to stop a train, getting the message to the train engineer may take a few minutes. As you know, it takes a train traveling at 55 miles per hour, a mile or more, to stop. Stay on the line until you receive confirmation from the dispatcher that all trains, including those on nearby tracks, have been stopped before allowing any activity on the tracks.
When any of your duties require you to be along the railroad right-of-way, report your activities to the railroad dispatcher by locating the nearest blue sign, telling the dispatcher your location along the railroad tracks. They can slow or stop the traffic to keep everyone safe. Let's talk about how you can play a part in preventing another type of tragedy. Trespassing deaths have risen by more than 21% in the past 5 years. Unless you're at an authorized crossing, no one is allowed to be on railroad property other than railroad employees. Trespassing on railroad property is different than all other forms of trespassing in North Carolina.
State law requires a person to have consent before entering railroad property. Unlike other trespassing laws, which require proof that a person was prohibited from entering the property, the railroad trespassing law requires consent from the railroad company to enter the railroad right-of-way. That's a big difference. Signs, gates, and other barricades are not required.
People trespass for many reasons. As a shortcut, hunting, fishing, recreation, or sometimes to use a railroad as a background for a photograph.
Regardless of the reason, trespassing is illegal and dangerous. There's a misconception that trains are loud. In fact, modern trains are surprisingly quiet, and when a person is listening to music, talking on a cell phone, or just not paying attention, they will not hear the approach of a fast-moving train. The selfie of these 3 young girls shows a bright light in the background. It's a train. 3 seconds later, they died.
Unlike other forms of trespassing on railroad property can carry the death penalty. Trespassers do not realize the risk they take. Tracks are only for trains. You can help prevent this tragedy and save lives by enforcing the law.
With increasing population and rail traffic, only active prevention can keep crossing crashes and trespassing deaths from rising in the future. Now that you know how to stop a train and keep people off the tracks, use these tools to help prevent such tragedies.